the 27th of July edition of Track Announcer's Notebook. Pat Gonzalez, along with my co-host Stuart Nodell. Tonight's show, as you can gather if you've been on here for a couple of minutes, will be dedicated to celebrating Art Robbins, the man and the racer. We'll touch on a little bit about the racing that happened this past weekend, and then the vast majority of our show will celebrate Art the Dart Robbins. Not just the racer, but we're going to go back and visit with some folks who knew Art all the way back to when he was in grade school, and then from there up through a pretty impressive hockey career, but also a young man who suffered the loss of both of his parents within about 6 months as a teenager that had a lasting impact on his life. So tonight we celebrate our friend and Art Robbins, and I'd like to extend a deep condolences to the Art Robbins family, Karen, his sister, his brother-in-law, Ken, who is listening, and a number of other family members, as well as some very, very close friends. We've got Steve Lightner, son, of course, Frank Lightner, who was so much a part of Art's racing career. Reuben Mcmurder, who raced handlebar to handlebar with him. We'll get Reuben's thoughts, and of course, very shortly, we'll have Shelley Kane, Art's grade school friend, on board. But first of all, Stuart Nodell, another busy weekend in motorcycle road racing, the SOAR Round 3 at Grand Bend, and of course, the opening round, and hopefully it is the opening round and not the only round of the CSBK Canadian Superbike Championships that took place at Calabogie. As well, we had MotoGP at Jerez, and this is a look at the two Superbike races, both run on Saturday. It was a very compressed schedule that Colin Fraser and his team were able to put together with the help of Sandy Noche of Pro 6 Cycle, and Sandy has really stepped up to make that race and the races that ran on Saturday at Calabogie possible. I think they proved that it could be done, and we await to see whether or not they're able to put together similar races at some of the other tracks in Ontario, whether that's at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, possibly Grand Bend, possibly Shannonville Motorsport Park. But they were able to get in the 4 classes: Superbike, Pro Sport Bike, Amateur Lightweight Sport Bike, and Amateur Superbike, that actually ended up running on Sunday. But there's a look at the results of the 2 Superbike races. Jordan Zoke taking the win in both. Won at Handley on Saturday over Trevor Daly and Michael Leon. Jeff Williams was up there in second, but faded late to finish 4th. And talented Quebec racer Sebastien Tremblay finished in 5th on a Kawasaki 600. And then later in the day on Saturday, in fact, because they were up against the noise bylaw, they cut a couple of laps out of the race, and it ran, I believe, 10 laps rather than 12. Zoke, again, the winner, leading start to finish, but he was hounded throughout by Jeff Williams, who turned in an inspiring ride. I think Jeff is in his late 40s now. He was racing Superbikes and one of the top riders and winning in the series back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But tip of the announcer's cap to Jeff Williams for a great ride on the weekend. Trevor Daly got another podium finish. Sebastien Tremblay up to 4th, and Samuel Guerin rounded out the top 5. And then, of course, on Sunday, a number of the racers who did not go. There we see the amateur Superbike results, as well as Pro Sport Bike that Sebastien Tremblay won, and Amateur Lightweight Sport Bike. And at the age of 60 years old, Tony Sharpless finished 5th behind all those young kids that are ahead of her in Amateur Lightweight Sport Bike. We hope to have Tony on a future edition of Track Announcer's Notebook. So That was the CSBK races at Calabogie. Ken McAdam doing a great job with the SOAR series, their third round after getting in a couple of rounds in June. A great turnout from what we hear. Things ran smoothly, almost 170 riders out there for round 3 for the SOAR championship. And if we're going to give an award for the longest drive, it'll go to Clive Nigakeen and Elliot Vieira, who raced at Calabogie Saturday. They had a bit of an underpowered bike, ended up finishing 7th in Pro Sport Bike, came back to Claremont, Ontario, picked up their other bike, went to SOAR, had to start at the back of the grid, and ended up finishing 2nd in that race. And Elliot Vieira is actually leading the SOAR Pro 600 Sport Bike Championships with the 4th round coming up next month. So that is a quick recap of the racing on the weekend. But Stuart, at least here in Ontario, MotoGP, same result at Jerez yesterday. Mic is off, Stuart. There you go.
Yeah, no, I was just going to chime in, Pat. Yeah, they had all the Yamahas took the podium in MotoGP with Fabio Quartararo won the 2nd race in subsequent weeks, and Maverick Vinales was 2nd. And then they had Valentino Rossi made a podium appearance and finished 3rd. So it looked like it was a great event all around. And it was certainly a scorcher there, as it was here in Ontario.
Yeah, interesting that the doctor was in the house and got to the podium. 41-year-old Valentino Rossi. You add the ages of the 2 riders who were ahead of him in that race, it only amounts to 46. Quartararo 21 and Vinales is 25. So we'll continue to follow MotoGP and their rescheduled schedule for 2020. As we said off the top, tonight's show is to really celebrate our friend, racer, Art Robbins, who many of us know in various capacities. Shelley Kane, Reuben Mcmurder, and Steve Lightner will all share their thoughts. Many of you online, feel free to go to the Q&A and send a comment or two, and in some cases we'll be able to get you on, if not with video, at least audio, to share some of your thoughts a little bit later on. Our show normally goes from 8 till 9, but we can go well beyond 9 o'clock if needed tonight to give Art the fitting tribute and celebration of his life that he deserves. So Stuart, if you want to start with the first of the visuals, and I'll bring on Shelley Kane, who I met a number of years ago. Shelley went to middle school with Art, was his friend, and also later on in life became his partner for a while. Shelley, first of all, thank you for coming on. Sorry for your loss, and I know it's been a very, very difficult few days. But here is Art. You know, he was a good rider even on that horse back then, but I don't think you even knew Art from when he was really little, but yeah, you can just see that zest for life in his eyes even at that young age.
Let's try a little bit, other way.
Kelly? Oh, Shelley, are you there?
I am there. Can you hear me, Pat?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
And sorry for that ghastly picture. Yeah, that's not me. Yeah, no, I knew Art, probably I met Art when I was about 9 and from West Hill. And we went to Joseph Branch together, and I remember Art. My memory that sticks in my mind the most about Artie is him coming in on his dirt bike in his bare feet, no shirt, and his hair down past his ass, and just riding into school on his dirt bike in grade 7. That's my first memory of Art.
Yeah, and what did the teachers think of Art's routine back then in grade 7?
They didn't say too much. Nobody said too much. He was just there, and he was just, you know, present. So he had a presence about him, and he was a very sweet person. So I just remember that, and instantly having a huge crush on this kid.
Do you remember what that first dirt bike was? Was it homemade? Was it
homemade? No, it was homemade. It was definitely homemade. And he used to come into school in the morning after going through the trail to get to Mance Road to Joseph Brandt with no shoes on and no shirt. He'd bring a shirt, but it wasn't on his body. And he'd just drive into school like that in the morning time.
Well, he was one of a kind. What kind of a student was Art?
Art hated school. Art, he didn't like school. He was mechanical. He wanted to. He loved to ride. That was Art. He just loved to ride from the minute that I met him. Anyways, when we were, like I said, 9, 10 years old. He's very good at math, though. I will say that. But he wasn't really into school very much.
Okay, Stuart. So now we go a little bit later. I assume that's Art with the crew cut on the left. We're only kidding. I think we all, those who were in our 50s and 60s, all had haircuts like that. And Art's mom and dad, I assume they spent a lot of weekends taking Art to hockey practice and hockey games and hockey tournaments. Shelley, can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, you faded out there.
Yeah, I'm saying we're just looking at the pictures here on the screen. That's Art with his mom and dad, and they must have been busy taking Art to all those hockey games and tournaments because he was a pretty gifted hockey player playing AAA. And I don't know if you've been able to confirm all the stories, and this is one that Art told me, that Wayne Gretzky was the same age as Art, and at the big tournaments around Ontario, Art's job was to shadow Gretzky, and I believe it was one tournament game against Gretzky. Art got 3 goals. He got the hat trick, and Gretzky only got 1 goal. What can you tell us about Art Robbins, the gifted and talented hockey player?
Yeah, he was very good hockey player. And that is a true story because I had the clipping, the little newspaper article, the original newspaper article where it actually mentioned Art Robbins scored a hat trick against Wayne Gretzky. They never mentioned the team. They just mentioned Wayne Gretzky. So
that would have been
I remember seeing that article and having it in my possession at one time. In one of Art's books that he had. There's many books he had a lot of clippings and cuttings. But yeah, he was a good hockey player, as were many guys in this area growing up in West Hill. A lot of them played hockey. Yeah, Art was a good hockey player.
And then Art had the tragedy in his life when his mom and dad passed away within about 6 months. What do you remember about that, and how devastating was that to a teenage Art Robbins?
It was very devastating. He loved his mom and dad a lot, and they cherished him too. It's from what I can remember. And they both died 6 months apart. They both died of cancer, and Art was only, I think, 16 at the time. So that kind of just sort of changed the course of his life. I think he would have had a lot more support. Obviously, had his mom and dad, unfortunately, not passed away, but they did. And at that point, he was just starting out, basically. And I think that kind of changed the course of his life because he didn't have the support there anymore, you know? He had his sister who was wonderful, and his aunts and uncles and cousins, but he didn't have his mom and dad.
Yeah.
So that was tragic.
And again, we have Art's sister, Karen, joining us tonight. And hopefully the memories and the photos and the thoughts that everyone is going to share here over the next hour will be a fitting tribute to Karen's brother, Art Robbins. And there you see that picture on the upper right. Stuart Nodell, I don't think you won that many races with all those plaques that they used to give out at Shannonville back in those days. But an amazing,
not quite, Pat.
amazing rider. Before we move on with Shelley for a minute, and we've got Steve Lightner and Reuben Mcmurder standing by, why don't you share some of the thoughts and questions that might be there that some of our attendees have put up on our Q&A.
Okay, well, the first one we had is right when he came on with us was Stephen Smart. who had the privilege of owning Art's katana after George Kadzrauzens, I believe is the last name. Not sure.
Katruzens, I think it was.
Okay, yeah, he had sold it to Stephen, and again, Stephen was just really privileged, he felt, in order to own such a cool bike with such a great historical pedigree. So that's one comment we've got out there. And obviously Steve, like many of us, had watched many of Art's races, 84, 85, even before then. I remember I was about probably 9 years old, I want to say, when my dad would bring me out to Mosport or Shannonville, and I remember Art kind of coming on the scene and being just, blazingly fast and naturally talented. And obviously guys like Reuben that we have on with us this evening and Lang Hindle, these guys were legends and heroes to most of us growing up watching the races.
Shelley Kane, you went to school with Art. You were, school friends, and then later on, Art was your partner.
He was.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Art Robbins, the man, and how that all went.
Well, I think Art was a lovely man. I think he was very patient and very kind. I was with him for almost 10 years in a serious relationship, and he helped raise my son Dylan Kane Van Kirk. When Art and I started going out together, I mean, I knew Art for many years before that, and I knew what was going on in his life and stuff like that. But when we first started going out, Art's life had changed dramatically at that point. He wasn't racing any longer. He was moving from his house on Dunstall, which was his parents' home. And they had passed away, years before that. And when he came to live with me, actually, when I lived in Peterborough, and that was the first time that we had lived together. He lived with me in Peterborough, and we lived in Belleville. I had owned a house there, and we also lived in Ajax for many years. So he had sort of left Toronto at that point and had stayed away for quite some time. And then in 2011, I believe that was the tribute to Superbike Legends.
Yeah.
At Mosport, yeah. So we had been contacted then, and everybody was saying, "Come on, Art, you got to come out to this. You got to come out to this." So I talked him into going to that, and it was pretty neat because I wasn't expecting, or Dylan, what would happen when we got there, and I don't think Art was quite expecting it either. But he was just like swarmed with fans and people, and I remember him getting on that bike that somebody had purchased is in a museum, his first bike. And he got on, he was supposed to wave, and, he's behind the truck with Lang and those guys, and he's supposed to wave, the old timers. And next thing you know, him and Lang just took right off. And I could just see his face. I was standing up watching him, as he came around the corner, and I could just see his face, and he was just so happy. And it was just like old habit to him. He hadn't been on a bike and raced or gone around a track in many years. And he just got on that bike and he just went. And I started crying, of course, because it was just so exciting and I was so happy for him. And, it was like he had his life back kind of thing. And so, I mean, those are the things I remember about Art. We all know that, people have their problems through life. And there's something I just don't want to focus on with Art, because he, was my true love and my friend. And it's unfortunate, that he just went down a different path. And that's all I can basically say at this point about Art. I'll always love him, and he was a huge talent. Like came so natural to him when he got on that bike. I couldn't believe it when he got on that bike in 2011. I couldn't believe it when he went around the track like that and hadn't been on a bike in so long. And it was amazing. It was really nice to see that.
Well, I know we interviewed him that Saturday morning along with all of the other masters of Mosport riders who were there, including Reuben Mcmurder.
Yes.
I'll get Reuben's take as to exactly what happened on the track there. It was supposed to have been a slow parade lap behind the pace rider, Peter Derry, who was leading people out, and all of a sudden a superbike race broke out.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. It
Now,
was like,
After that, with Art back at the track, didn't he get an offer to ride a vintage superbike later in the summer of 2011, maybe at the VRRA weekend?
He did, and it was a friend of his, and the gentleman's name has slipped my mind, but he lived in Pickering, and actually he had lent Art a Ducati, which we came down from Belleville in November on in the snow, to go to a friend's funeral. So that was something. But when we got to the track, Art had come out to me and he said, "Shelley, I'm not getting on this bike." I said, "Why? Why? Race me." He says, "I'm not getting on that bike. I'll die." So I guess he felt that the bike wasn't quite up to standards, and he just opted not to ride, which was unfortunate. But he looked it over and he felt that it wasn't safe, is what he was saying. So we were there, but he never rode that day.
Okay, Shelley, I'm going to move on to some of our other guests. Please stay with us. We may come back to you later on, but I thank you for reaching out and for sharing your heartfelt memories of Art Robbins.
You're welcome, Pat.
Stuart, before we move on to Steve Lightner, do we have any other comments or questions to take care of?
Just some people chiming in. We have Stu Shaw with us here from the West Coast tonight. He obviously has fond memories of Art racing and was certainly a big part of the racing scene back in the 80s. And he remembers, like most people, chanting Art's name, loudly in the crowd. And Karen, I can reach out because Karen has also chimed in that if we'd like some further comments from Art when he was younger, she would like to maybe share some stories with us as well.
Okay, so we will get to Karen. Karen, of course, Art's sister, who lives out in Saskatoon, I believe, in Saskatchewan, and had exchanged some emails with her a little bit earlier, and her husband, Ken Singer, who also, like me, happens to be a longtime radio guy. He's retired, I'm not. Let's go to Steve Lightner. And Steve, I met you back in 2011 when Art was part of our Motorcycle Road Racers Reunion, Masters of Mosport.
Yeah.
And, you and I have exchanged some emails and conversation. When Art was hanging out in the Lightner and Bush shop, you were just a little 11-year-old kid. And seeing this, big shot racer Art Robbins, he must have become an instant hero to you.
Well, he wasn't a big shot when he first came to the shop, but yeah, when you're a little kid, there was something about Art that captivated me, right? He was 21 and I was 11, and just Art was cool. He was just cool, and I took an interest. Well, obviously he's racing for us, and so going to the track, Art just, I don't know, I idolized him. Many Saturdays out in the parking lot beside the shop, trying to drag my knee on the Z50, trying to be Art. Yeah, he charismatic. I don't know else to say it. What else to say? And it wasn't just me. Speaking with my father earlier, Dad was saying that we spent 3 years with a guy that wasn't fast. And then Art knew Brian from Brian's shop, which was, I think, the Yosh North distributor. And
yep.
That's how Art got introduced to our shop. And then we just started building the bike, and shortly after second or third race, I think it was a San Air, we started winning races, which never happened before. And Dad said we were a good shop of a good bunch of guys, but Art brought the business, right? Like he, being at the track, being on, and the fanfare that he had, everybody just came to the shop that he went to, and that happened to be us. And Dad said that he was very, very thankful for that. He's got many fond memories of running with Art at Loudon, at the AMA race, where he almost puked in his helmet when it was so hot. And they finished fourth, winning the 2 championships in 1 year. All that what did for the business. Dad massively appreciated it. And well, as time went on, right, we stopped racing with Art. Art went his separate way on the TZ for a few years, but came back with the Hondas. And then Dad stopped the whole racing thing, and we kind of lost touch with Art. But I was in my 20s. I wasn't a kid anymore, and we had Art's number in the Rolodex at work. And I remember looking at it going, I'm going to call. And then 3 days later, I got up the courage and I called and started a friendship with him, right? Not the little kid looking up to the idol sort of thing. And I started going to his house on Dunstall and meeting with him every month. I'd make a trip out to see how he was, go hang out with him, have talks with him. I went to court with him to vouch for him, to have him come live with me, right? But that didn't happen the day he was supposed to get it, and he never called. But then I lost track of him. And then the Superbike, the Legends thing happened, that Shelley was talking about. I think it was my wife that contacted her. She found a profile for Art the Dart on Facebook and contacted the person who had started it. And that's how we got in contact with him again. And we sent him your way. And then I lost track of him again after that. And then 3 years ago was the last time I talked to him. He called me. I was having a hard time in my life. We were being moved out of our place. And Art called the day we were leaving. And he said, Stephen, I need help. And I'm like, what do you need? And he goes, I've got nowhere to go. He goes, I'm in Caledon at a homeless shelter that'll take me and my dog. And I couldn't help him. I didn't have the means to help him, and that was the last I spoke with him. But yeah, Art was a big figure in my life. Art changed the way the shop ran, the way we did things, everything. He in my eyes, Lightner and Bush and Art Robbins went together. They were synonymous. But yeah. Sorry, I went off a little there.
Okay, Steve. We're going to come back to you a little bit later on. I know you posted something on Facebook on the weekend that maybe you can share with us a little bit later on. Sure. Stuart Nodell, let's go back to you for any further comments from those who have joined us here this evening.
Yeah, Pat, it's just, I think we've got another gentleman here that you're well aware of, Martin Schubert. And he was just mentioning that he also raced out of the Lightner and Bush shop from 1980 till 84, and he knew Art quite well during those years. So he's also here with us this evening, joining in on the show. So that's great. Okay.
And again, we normally wrap this up at 9 o'clock, but we got so many people on the Zoom call tonight on Track Announcer's Notebook that we're going to probably extend it and maybe get people like Steve Smart, like Martin Schubert, just to share some audio with us. I know he's been patiently waiting. Reuben Mcmurder, you almost missed the riders meeting, but good to have you. Good to have you aboard. Let's start with what Shelley was describing there. 2011. John Walker and I helped organize the Masters of Mosport Motorcycle Road Racers Reunion with lots of help from Bar Hodgson and Peter Derry and many, many others to bring back some of the greats. What do you remember? Because you were part of that year's class of Masters of Mosport. What happened in those parade laps where Art decided to heck with this? This is way too slow. I'm going to go and run this bike. And he was actually on the replica Suzuki GS 1000, or maybe it was 1100. That's part of the Bar Hodgson collection. They brought the bike out, and Art was just smiles looking at that old bike, and I'm sure in his own mind reliving some of the glory days back in the 80s when he was racing and winning on that.
You know, Pat, I think that Art was, he underestimated how much everybody loved him. I think it really did, as Shelley said earlier, he was just floored at how much everybody was happy to see him. As far as the three of us guys on the track, well, nobody was ever going to let anybody else be ahead of him, so that was a no-brainer.
So what happened? Art took off. Did you take off, and so did Lang? And who ended up getting to the line first?
I think it was probably pretty even. Otherwise, we'll have to rerun it.
All right, we don't have any videotape of it, but what was it like for you coming back there and seeing Lang and Art? I know you see Lang from time to time, but I'm sure you hadn't seen Art in a long time. To come back and reminisce about some of those classic superbike races of the early to mid 80s.
You know, from the very beginning with Art, it was wheel to wheel, all of us. But back to the Mosport thing, it was just, we were just so happy to see Art and know that he was still alive and smiling, and the same old Art. You know, you hear tidbits here and there that he was having a tough time and you wish you could have been more involved and helped him. That, you know, will forever feel that way. But I was just happy, at least for those couple of weekends that he come up for the Masters of Mosport, that it cheered him up for a little while.
Is there a race when you look back at your career that you had with Art that really stands out in your mind? That, hey, this was one of those classic superbike battles.
Yeah, well, there's quite a few. There's certainly a couple. You know, Art and I, from '82 to '87 for him, and of course I went on to '92. But he and I went wheel to wheel, especially in '83 after Lang retired. Art and I were the two guys at the front, and we were both going for the championship. And that year we did a special event that was part of the series down in Loudon. It was part of the race series. They teamed up with Weir, and all the Loudon guys were flabbergasted at Art and I just basically laughing all their guys. They weren't even in the event. And I don't know, it was pretty close to the end of the race. Art and I were going back and forth for the lead all the time, and we were going by a back marker, and the guy went one way around Art and the other way around me, and then I ended up hitting the guy, and we went flying. And after Art come right up after and said, that was a great race, you know, too bad it ended that way, and all that stuff. And that's what it was like all the time with Art and I. We just enjoyed racing each other. You know, both of us, of course, wanted to win, but it was just, there was never any animosity. It was always, let's just go out there and have some fun. We just both enjoyed leaning the bike over and making it go as fast as we could and trying to beat the other guy. Art always complained that I was in better shape than him, and near the end of the race, I sometimes had an edge. But Art was a natural talent. He was fearless, but he was also in control. He leaned the bike over. He was comfortable with everything he did. He didn't crash very often. We all had crashes, but Art was not a crasher by any means. And so the racing was only part of it. But I remember another race we did was in Montreal. We did the Formula One Grand Prix event there. Art, this would have been 87. I think I was on the Yamaha and Art was on the Rothman's bike. Yeah. We were running second and third or something, and we banged into each other and went down. It might have been my fault. He might have moved over. It was kind of a racing accident. And he was really upset with me. He came over after. I said, "Okay, Art." So I took him out to dinner, and we spent the night and painted the town. And I don't think I've been the same since, but we were friends on the track and off the track. And having everything that's happened to him, I feel so bad things didn't go better for him.
Reuben, earlier we touched on Art Robbins, the very talented hockey player playing against the likes of Wayne Gretzky. You're a few years older than Art. You were also a pretty accomplished hockey player in London, Ontario.
Sarnia and I played hockey.
Sarnia. What about the skill sets as a young hockey player? How does that translate into riding a motorcycle fast?
Well, it's a good question, I wasn't surprised when I was back at a party at Arts one time and we got talking about hockey, that we both had played AAA and all that kind of stuff and competitive. I'm not sure what the correlation is. Certainly, Art and I shared a lot of things that we were similar in, and I think a lot of racers. We're free spirits. We like to go for it. Art, as you know, he didn't hold him back from anything.
Well, Reuben, thanks for sharing your thoughts and memories on Art. We'll come back to you a little bit later on. I'm going to go back to Stuart Nodell to see if we have any further comments or questions, or maybe some new people checking in. And then I'm going to have Stuart bring up Karen Robbins to share some of her thoughts and words that she'd like to convey this evening. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. We've had a couple more people chime in. Nathan Naslin's with us again this evening. Obviously, most of us know him from his days at the racetrack, being involved with Suzuki Canada. And he has clear visions. He's from out west, and he was always impressed with Art and his Rothman's Honda program and how professional they looked when they headed out to the Westwood Nationals.
Okay. Do we have Karen Robbins? If you could...
give me a second here, Pat, and I'll convert Karen over to a panelist, and we can let her speak.
Okay. And again, for those who may be tuning in for the first time, Stuart and I have been doing these track announcers notebook shows every Monday evening, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Since the beginning of May, we'll continue to do these and bring together the motorcycle racing community, update on what's happening with racing, information on various series and rescheduled events and so on and so forth. And of course, the results from the previous weekend. Are we almost there, Stuart? Yeah,
I think we're here just about.
Okay, I think just Karen has to unmute.
Karen's unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah, we should have Karen here now.
Okay, so Karen, and Karen, I assume that is Ken.
Yes.
Yes,
Nice to
Ken.
meet you.
Always good to see a fellow radio guy. You're smart. You're retired. I'm still trying to sell advertising at Q107 and Chorus, which has been a little bit challenging the last few months, but we'll get beyond that. Karen and Ken, first of all, again, my condolences. Sorry for your loss. And I know that you had moved out to Saskatchewan, but I'll leave it to you to tell the story and of your brother Art.
Well, Art was definitely a welcome addition in our family. We were just thrilled. We all fell in love with him the second we saw him, you know, and he was always loving, kind, considerate, and very protective of people that he loved or cared about. And I've just seen that demonstrated so many times over the years.
Yeah.
So his first bike was actually a Rutman. He was 7 years old.
Wow.
And my father told him that to clean up the bike or something. And so he took it down the basement and took it apart completely, placed every bolt where it's supposed to go back, cleaned everything. And my dad saw it like that. And he said, "Put this back together," thinking that he was giving him a task too much. Well, he did put it back together, and it ran better than it did before. So he was a natural as far as the mechanics of the bike go too. Yeah.
And pretty good riding them as well. Karen, we know of Art, the young boy, the teenager growing up into hockey. didn't care for school, had an aptitude for all things mechanical. Did you ever have any deep brother and sister conversations in terms of what Art wanted to do when he grew up? What were his hopes and dreams?
Yes, yes, his hopes and dreams. We especially talked about them when our parents died, was he wanted to be a firefighter like my father. And when the fire department found out he was deaf in his left ear because he had an in, he couldn't be a firefighter. So that's when he started taking motorcycles a lot more seriously. So his plan at the time, and it, a lot to do with Lightner and Bush, was to learn as much as he could and be the best rider he could be and have his own high performance bike shop. Yeah, but of course, you know, all that responsibility at such a young age, you know, our parents actually died closer to 3 months apart. So having all that responsibility and being so young and not having the emotional ability to resolve anything, he just made sure that he got along with everyone, but he stuffed how he felt, you know, so that became, you know, one of, I think, his number one asset and his number one liability are his determination to do things. And so his determination to handle everything on his own, maybe that's the liability. And the determination to win, to ride bikes, to accomplish what he did in hockey and motorcycles, you know, that really came out there too.
Yeah, I know in the obituary that that you wrote and put out, you're hoping to have a formal celebration of life. Those things are very difficult, given the COVID-19 situation we're dealing with. What are your thoughts once we are allowed to gather, whether that's a celebration at a racetrack, at one of the races, or someplace else? What would you like to see, almost as a request to the motorcycle racing community out there? This is just a very small tribute here on this Zoom webcast, but I think, you know, in talking to a few people, we would love to see something more grandiose, something where people can actually physically come together and truly celebrate Art Robbins, the man and the racer.
Absolutely. And it's been so good to see people today. Reuben, I remember very well. I was around in most of the races till about 1984 when I got transferred with my job. And so to answer your question, kind of waiting to, we have, our family has decided we're going to have one, but we haven't made any plans. But the one thing we're waiting is for the phase 3 to be, as far as COVID goes, to be in place before we traveled, you know. So I know I've thought of the racetracks and things like that. It's just, you know, there's a lot of, I will definitely have to talk, but I'd love to hear these tributes and these personal stories from his racing friends and Lightner and Bush. And hi, Steve, I've heard all about you. I hadn't met you before. Anyways, yeah, so there's a lot of key people in Art's life, so.
Well, Karen, I'm sure that there are lots of folks on the Zoom call tonight who would be more than willing to help in any way to make that happen, including Stuart and myself. And I know Pat Barnes, who was one of the folks who tried to help Art. There's a caring motorcycle community out there, and you know, I'm sure we can help put together something that is fitting. You've got a radio guy sitting beside you there. Ken, what do you remember of Art? How many of his races did you get out to see?
No.
Well, Pat, I only met Karen a few years ago, so I unfortunately only have Karen's stories and memories to go by. But I've learned more about Art these past few days from people in the family and friends of Art and so on. I'm deeply sorry that I never got to meet him because I've heard so many good things about the man that he was.
Well, we'll have to get you some of those old 1980 Castrol Superbike videos that I was honored to work with the late Craig Hill on, and get you a few of those so you can watch Art at his very best. Karen, any final thoughts before we move on with a couple of other folks here who are part of the call?
Just thank you very much, and it's just wonderful to hear from everyone. And thanks again.
Karen, thank you. Ken, thank you. And we will be in touch. Stuart, anything further? And then we'll go back to Steve and Stuart. We'll go back to Reuben, and if Shelley is still on board, we'll get some further thoughts from her.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. We've had one of our guests from last week, Henry DeGao, is with us this evening, and he has vivid memories of Art being the top North American scorer at Macau in 1987. He thinks it was a 7th, and and he said Rick Hobbs was Art's crew chief at that event. So that's a pretty good. That was a cool story last week to talk to Henry about that event.
Yeah, well, for Henry, we'll just give Henry a little preview here. Henry was on our show last week talking about the Macau Grand Prix, and of course, Art was the very first Canadian rider to go over to be part of the North American team. And, you know, prior to that, let's see, there it is. You can sort of see it in the background there. That is a picture coming out of the International Horseshoe Turn at Daytona. Art on the 47, Henry on the 79, taken by legendary Canadian photographer Bill Petro. And I picked that up on the weekend. So Henry, we're going to be shipping that off to you. You can add it to the wall in your room where you've got a Yamaha TZ750 parked. How many people have a Yamaha TZ750 parked in their living room? Henry DeGao does. Henry, good of you to join us. And let's go back to Reuben Mcmurder. Reuben, speaking of Daytona, not sure if you were there the same year that Art was, because I know you had some incredible rides in the Daytona 200. Probably should have won it in '89 rather than John Ashmead. But do you remember any of those years where you were there that Art was there on the TZ?
Oh yeah, I remember every year. I was there from 1980 to 92 without missing a beat. And I did a lot of tire testing at Daytona at different times and stuff too. So another funny story that with Art was he always came to me for tire advice, even though we were competitors. And tires are one of the biggest parts of racing. And I could say whatever I wanted to him about tires, and he trusted me to be fair with him, and I always was. But he just worried so much about it. It was just that was always on his mind that he'd get all excited. And I was so tempted so many times, saying, no, I'm going to use this tire. I think it'd be better. But I just didn't have it in me to do it to him, because I was just such a nice guy. You know, we had more fun beating each other fairly than playing the gamesmanship stuff. We goofed around with other things, but not that.
Any stories of your years racing together at Daytona?
No, the year he was there with the Daytona for me was, you spent the whole winter getting ready for it. It was the most prepared you could be for a race, because and sometimes it was tough because you get a new bike 2 weeks before Daytona and have to get it ready in time. So it was a big deal. So for me, Daytona, I was pretty focused on running my team and having everything click and stuff. So I didn't have as much time as I maybe like to have had spent with other people. But I remember Art, when he was there in the TZ, ran well and then had some pit stop issues. And Daytona, you had to really be organized for.
Yeah. Steve Lightner, you've been listening to Karen's comments and Reuben's. Is there a Art Robbins story, maybe a race you attended, something happening back at the shop that you can share? And then let us know about the Facebook post that you did over the weekend.
I have lots of little weird things. In grade 6, I guess it was the end of '82, my teacher came up to me with a clipping from the Toronto Star that says Scarborough racers stalled by lack of cash, and it had a picture of Art on it. And I looked at her because it confused me. Why is my public school teacher giving me this picture? Because I knew who it was. And she looked at me and she goes, "Do you know who that is?" And I go, "Yeah, that's Art Robbins." And she goes, "Do you know who Johnny Reed is?" And I went, "Yeah, of course I do. That's Art's best friend." And she goes, "Johnny Reed is my brother."
Really?
I know. And I was like, "What?" Yeah, that was a bit of a floor job. And then in grade 11, I had a class with a girl named Robin, who I believe is Art's, I want to say cousin. Karen would know, I think. And that was another, like, what? You know Art? So it was kind of weird. Stories about Art at the shop. Oh, the week of the Molson Superbike Challenge in '82, I remember Art was at the shop on a stock GS 1100 and he left. And our shop was on Woodbine and Steeles-ish. And Woodbine went on to the 404 directly on, and Art pitched the bike on the on-ramp. And then came back and his arm was all rashed up and everything. There was another time, I think it was the next race, where week before the race, arm wrestling in a bar, it did something to his wrist, which caused all sorts of pumping problems. And he crashed the bike that weekend. And that was when he rented Lang's bike. You see all those weird pictures of Art on the Cowie.
Yeah, and you know what, Steve, if I can just embellish that story.
Yep.
I was announcing that race in the tower, and Lang Hindle was up there, and he was pacing back and forth like an expectant father, just hoping that Art didn't pitch it away. But I think he brought it home just fine. But that's probably the most nervous I've seen Lang Hindle on that with Art on that Kawasaki.
He probably should have been. Art was not comfortable on the bike at all. Other things. Oh gosh, in '84, I think Art was riding the TZ at a bar at Shannonville. Wound up coming out of the bar, not drunk, but crashed the bike into a guardrail. And my dad wound up buying the bike off of him and fixing it up. Oh gosh, through the years, Art would show up every once in a while with something, and Dad would buy it off him or whatever. But yeah, that's about at the track. I remember in '82 at Sanair opening the trailer and looking in to see Art pacing back and forth, going kill, 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 pacing back and forth. I wasn't sure what was going on with that. I'm sure he was psyching himself up or something. Wheelies up and down Denison outside of the shop on the GS. City TV, Peter Gross, was that the guy's name?
Yeah, he was on there, sports guy.
He came to do an interview in '83 with Art, and Art doing wheelies from Woodbine to Steelcase on Denison, and then filming it. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay, and Steve, what about your thoughts and memories you posted on Facebook on the weekend? Maybe you can.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So I met Art when I was 10 and he was 20. I was on a Z50 Honda mini bike outside the shop in the Swiss LA parking lot. I'm sure they hated me in that parking lot. But I remember Art walking out of the shop and I noticed him. I knew who he was. I knew he was the new guy, the new racer guy. But that was about it. And he came out into the parking lot and walked past me going towards Swiss LA. And I thought, this guy is so cool. And so I dumped the mini bike and I followed him from a distance, and he wound up at Swish LA, and I followed him into Swish LA, keeping my distance, and then he got let in and was led to a booth. And when he got into the booth and the woman walked away, I walked over to the booth and got in and sat with him. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, little maggot, what do you want?" And I don't remember what I said, but he bought me lunch. And then we had lunch and we walked back. And it was from that point, I'm like, man, this guy is like cool, absolutely cool. And then in '87, the Rothmans deal, they had all sorts of posters and jackets and shirts and hats, but I got Art to sign a poster for me. And I walked up to him and he goes, "Hey, maggot," because that's what he does. And then he signed my poster to Steven. He is one of the only people aside from my parents to call me Steven. Even when he called me at home, Steven, right? I always know it was him. And so he signed my thing to Steven Foot Lightner. And then in brackets, grape stomping champion. Because I was 15, turning 16. I was 6'3", and I had size 12 feet. And I still have that thing that's, gosh, what, 35 years old, almost 33 years old. And yeah, that's how I met him. And that's, yeah.
Okay, Steve, we really appreciate you sharing some of those real personal moments with Art tonight with all of us.
Can I share one more? I got one more. Sorry, I mean, I'm going to say this to Reuben. That Loudon race was the only time I have ever seen rubber on a number plate on one of our bikes.
Yeah, I had it all over me.
Yeah, both sides. I think his leathers and his boots, and that I thought was the most coolest thing, to see rubber marks on a number plate. So, all right, I'm done.
Okay, Stuart, I know we've got some more of the images, and I want to thank photographers Bill Petro and John Walker with One Word for providing a lot of the images that you see. Also, Frank Ciampini, the Grand Poobah of Team Ciampini, who I had the honor of working with a little bit back in the 80s and 90s on some Aprilia 250s, for providing some of the photos that you've seen tonight. And of course, Karen sent through, and Shelley sent through, I think, a bunch of the family photos as well that we were able to share with you. Photos of Art when he wasn't on a motorcycle or wasn't on a victory podium tonight. They were real special. So Stuart, if we've got a few more comments or questions, then we'll let you go through the entire slideshow of photographs, and then maybe we can put on audio some of the other folks that have joined us. Of course, Charlie Black, Art's good friend, is on board, as well as Don Swindell's former Superbike guy. I think he raced against Art Robbins. He's out in the Vancouver area now. Gilles Bolduc, I see, is on board, and a number of other folks. So I think we're going to go beyond 9 o'clock, which is absolutely fine, because we want to give everybody an opportunity to share their thoughts, memories, and sentiments of Art Robbins, the man and the racer. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Yeah, actually, we did have a comment from Don Swindell's where he had pointed out that he had blown up a Katana at Sen Air, and they loaned one of Art's bikes to him, and he went on to win the amateur superbike at that event. So that he shared that little bit of information with us. And I do have a few hands raised. So one of them was Charlie Black, as you suggested. And let me just go. One of them was also Martin Schubert.
And I think Steve Smart maybe was on there.
Yeah, Steve Smart initially came on at the beginning.
Okay.
So which order do you want me to do? And Kevin Perry's got his hand up. Do you want me to go through the people?
Yeah, yeah. Let's just go and have those in their own words share their thoughts and memories about Art. Also, like to welcome our good friend Sam Boyd, the road manager for Burton Cummings, an avid motorcyclist and a big fan of superbike racing. Sam is on board with us. Of course, Pete and Carol Swedish, super motorcycle fans. And who else we see there? Our good friend Bob Coy with the USCRA. And Bob hoping to get in at least one vintage event in August. But again, it's still a very volatile situation in the U.S. Right now in terms of race series. We will tell you that next weekend, and we'll be following the results there, Canada's Alex Dumas, who's racing in the Stock 1000 class, will be running the Moto America event at Road Atlanta. And he was fourth in his last race at Road America in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. And we'll see whether Alex, who won the Twins Championship last year, the Junior Cup the year before, we had him on the show here about 3 weeks ago. Talented young rider. You're going to be hearing a lot more about him. Okay, Stuart, go ahead.
It looks like we've got Charlie here, so just do a test, but it looks like he's good to go.
Charlie, are you? Go ahead, Charlie.
I'll keep it very brief, Pat. My sincere condolences to Karen and the family. I met Art in the early 80s. We became best friends and stayed in contact right up until this year, as you know. And I would really like everyone to remember Art as the most sincere person that I ever met. And he just had the greatest sense of humor. And I don't think I've ever met a person that did not like him. And that's so important.
And Charlie, I know you reached out many times to try to help Art to get him back on track. You were there at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park in 2011 when Art came out to be part of the Masters of Mosport and celebration that we had there. And that was one special day indeed to see Art Robbins back out there with friends in his happy place on a motorcycle.
That was one of the happiest days of my life also, Pat. Just to do that for him and see how happy he was, it was a really great moment for Art. And thank you for putting it on.
Okay, Charlie, be well. We'll be in touch, and I'm sure you'll be part of the celebration for Art that hopefully we can get organized in the months to come with the blessing of Karen and Ken. Stuart, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to convert Martin Schubert over, Pat. So we'll see if he can.
Yep, I appreciate Martin's note there. I forgot that he was also running under the Lightner and Bush banner on his 250 Yamaha. He was one of the top 250 Grand Prix riders, back in the 80s at Shannonville when that was next to Superbike. That was probably the next premier class that featured so many great riders like Clive Nigakeen, Alan LaBrosse, Claude Leroux, Robert Generou, Gary Collins for a while there, and of course, Martin Schubert. I think we're about to have Martin on board.
Yeah, Martin should be here with us now.
Okay, Martin, welcome to Track Announcer's Notebook. You operated out of the same Lightner and Bush shop as Art Robbins. What are maybe a couple of stories that you can share with all of us here this evening?
Well, thanks for having me, Pat. It's been a long time since I've actually seen you. I'd like to share a couple of things. I'd like to first comment back on Lightner and Bush. I go back before I think Stephen was even born. I knew his dad from Winter Circle when they were on Yonge Street, just north of Shepherd. And I went to a public school just around the corner from there called Spring Garden Avenue Public School. And I used to go to Winter Circle, and I got to know Frank, and Gord was working there. And from there, they made several moves, and eventually they wound up on Denison. I'm sure you guys moved a bunch of times as well over the years. But to get back to the art thing, Frank was good enough and trusted me with the key to the shop. And on the weekends, I would work during the week, and on the weekends, I was able to open up the shop. I had the code for the security and stuff, and Art would be waiting outside, usually with some of his buddies and stuff, wanting to get in there. And so my earliest recollection of Art was, like it's been said, he was just a really happy, lucky-go kind of a guy, you know. He had a really kind of a strange disposition to him, and he always had that infectious smile. And, you know, we raced and stuff on weekends. I had a 250 at the time, and Art had the super bike. And I remember one weekend at San Air, Art allowed me to ride a super bike in one of the pro super bike practices. And I thought, this thing was a missile, man, you know. Art never did ride my 250 though, but one of the recollections I had was in 82 or 83. I'd have to look back up in my scrapbook. The Montreal Grand Prix was on. That was being run in conjunction with the F1 race. And Art was there that weekend with a super bike, and Reuben was there, and Lang was there, and Dale Singleton was there, and Miles Baldwin was there, I believe. And it was a mix of, they ran everything in two heats, the Superbike guys, and they were up in the first wave, and I was back in the second wave with the 250s. And Art, I remember that weekend that Mike Crompton was there helping out with Frank and helping out Art, and they wheeled the bike to the line. I think it was either a qualifying event or something, and it was the first event of the morning, and they couldn't find Art. Art apparently had some fun, I guess, the night before, and he'd left the track, and he was running across one of the bridges to get to the racetrack to be able to get on the bike. So here's Frank and Don and Gord and Crompton. I remember they were holding the bike on the mock bridge, and they couldn't find Art. And he was running across the bridge. I think his leathers or something were tied up to his waist or something. And I don't think he ever made it, you know.
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't. No. You know, so Art was a bit of a character. I think he really liked his nightlife, you know, and you know, and it was you know, part of the path that he decided to choose, you know. But I just thought I'd like to share that. And Steve, it's great to see you, man. I'd like to get together with you sometime. And,
absolutely.
Well, we can hopefully all get together at the celebration when we're able to do that. For Art Robbins and maybe another big motorcycle road racers reunion. Martin, thanks for sharing your thoughts on Art. Let's go back to Stuart Nodell. Stuart, have we got anybody else who wants to jump on board for a quick comment? Your mic's off, Stuart.
Sorry.
Hopping on here. Stuart, anybody else? Otherwise, I think I'd just like to go back to all of our guests for their final thoughts before we close off and put the checkered flag on this edition of Track Announcer's Notebook. You're muted, Stuart.
Yeah, go ahead, Pat. We've got the Q&A's been cleared.
Okay, so we've got all our comments. Let's start with Steve Lightner. Your final thoughts, Steve, on this night where we pay tribute to our friend, our racing hero, and the man, Art Robbins.
Legend. That's it. Legend. He is. It maybe not in the record books, but talk to anybody that went to a race. Just talk to anybody that went to a race. Watch the 1982 Superbike Challenge on TV when they're interviewing him, and you can hear the crowd screaming, "Go, Art," in the background. Art was a legend for his time.
Yeah, he was definitely a big fan favorite. I think he was so down to earth that a lot of race fans became an instant member of the Art Robbins fan club. Reuben Mcmurder, your final thoughts on Art Robbins, who
A couple quick things, Pat. That Montreal race, he was going over, he was coming across the track on the bridge in his that old Lincoln Continental he had, and they dropped the flag before he got to start. It was too bad, but it was a little bit typical, I guess. You know, when I first noticed Art, I'd only been a pro, I guess, a year or two. And my dad says, "You got to watch this kid. You got to watch this." I said, "Watch what?" He said, "Oh, this guy in amateur superbike. He wheelies all the way down the front straight and he shifts without using the clutch."
did you learn anything from him?
Huh?
Did Earl get you to learn anything from him?
Yeah, absolutely. He said, "Look what he's doing." I said, "Okay, I can do that."
All right. And is Shelley Kane still with us? Shelley?
I'm still listening, Pat.
Yeah. Okay, Shelley. That ominous photo has reappeared, but
Oh, it is. I am so sorry about that ghastly photo.
well, we're going to get our IT people and find out who is doing that. I know there's been some instances of Zoom meetings being hijacked. Hopefully, this is not the case. Shelley, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. Sorry for your loss and my condolences, but your final thoughts on your friend, your partner, and schoolmate Art Robbins.
Love, I guess, love. I'm going to miss him a lot. And he was, my greatest memories of Art and always instilled in my mind are him just so down to earth, like people were saying. He was very kind. He was very funny. He was very funny. He was very cute. And he always had no shirt and shoes on. I mean, that's how he lived with me, barefoot and shirtless. My friend, for sure. And I'm going to miss him a lot. I was, seeing him over the years, the last 47 years or however long. But I mean, even this year, even last week, the week before, had spent, time with Art. And just holding his hand because, at the end he was very ill. So, yeah. But I always loved him, still love him, no matter what. He'd phone me and I'd be there for him. So, he's definitely my friend, and I'm definitely going to miss him a lot. And that's about it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Shelley. You're a special young lady. Karen Robbins, Ken Singer, will like to leave you some time here for your final thoughts.
Thank you. I didn't say that how much he loved children. Like there was an instant link, and I could tell from Steve talking earlier, and that there's one picture with his 21st birthday when we gave him his first leathers, and that's his niece Michelle, like bugging him because they like to do that. Yeah. So yes, he was and he was hilarious. I don't think anyone's ever been able to make me laugh so hard in my life. Yeah. So I appreciate being reminded of all these things tonight. That was really awesome. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, Karen, thank you for coming on. Ken, thank you as well. Stuart, have we got, before we wrap it up, I think you've got the entire slideshow of images that maybe you can share with everybody before we close it out. We'll be back next Monday night, April the 3rd, with the next edition of Track Announcer's Notebook. I want to thank Ken and Karen, Shelley, Steve Lightner, Martin Schubert, all of our other guests who came on board, my co-host, Stuart Nodell, and again, our thanks to the photographers who provided the images, Bill Petro, along with John Walker and Frank Ciampini, and of course the family photos that Karen, I think Shelley, sent some of those to us as well to share with you tonight. Stuart, go ahead and share that screen.
Students